It ends with us cast member Isabella Ferrer is now suddenly declaring through her lawyers that Justin Baldoni is harassing her. And this update is wild. You suck, bish. I mean, you shouldn't say that, but
Picture this. Isabella Ferrer wraps a scene, still in Blake Lively's circle, texting Justin Baldoni that he created the safest set she's ever been on. Warm, kind, grateful words. But months later, those same texts became weapons in court filings, used to suggest she lied, pressured, or even manipulated. What changed between then and now? Why did those messages become the center of a storm that could wreck her career? Today, we're pulling apart the timeline behind Ferrer's Hollywood nightmare.
this update is wild. I gotta be honest. Look, I've been supportive of Isabella because I do feel like she's in an impossible situation. And technically, this is really her lawyer's fault, this latest filing, which was such a mistake. I have some quotes from Ron Zambrano as well. He was unable to attend, but his words, "This motion is crap." It's terribly drafted from a grammar standpoint, misspells a lot of names. It's also a bull-s argument meant to confuse and gaslight.
Imagine smiling after a long shoot, grabbing your phone, and sending a message that says the set was the safest you've ever felt. No fear, no tension, nothing but gratitude. Now picture that same text pulled apart months later, highlighted in legal filings, and suddenly painted as evidence that you were lying about everything else. That's the position Isabella Ferrer found herself in, and it's one reason people are now questioning whether she was telling the truth, or if she was dragged into a role she never asked to play. At the start, her messages to Justin Baldoni didn't read like cries for help. They were warm, thoughtful, and even affectionate, the kind of texts you'd expect from someone who respected the people around her. She praised the atmosphere, thanked him for support, and put in writing that she felt protected. On paper, that's not unusual. Most young actors do this to stay on good terms with directors. But these particular texts soon became the center of a much bigger storm. The strange part comes when Blake Lively's legal team began citing those same words to claim Ferrer had been pressured. Instead of proof of comfort, they framed them as proof of control. The kind of thing you say when you're too intimidated to admit the opposite. In public records, they didn't show the full conversations. They cherry-picked fragments, leaving out soft jokes or casual remarks that suggested she was relaxed. Out of context, the compliments looked suspicious, almost rehearsed, like lines from a script. But gossip commentators pointed out the irony. If Ferrer truly felt manipulated, why would she describe the set as safe without anyone asking her to? Some even argued that the texts poked holes in the harassment story altogether. They suggested the real contradiction was in the filings, not in her late-night words to Baldoni. The back and forth created a perfect storm. On one hand, a rising actress talking about safety and trust. On the other, a high-powered legal team determined to spin that same language into a narrative of fear. The contradiction is impossible to ignore. The exact phrases that should protect Ferrer are now being brandished as weapons. It raises a haunting question. Did she ever realize how her private messages could be twisted into court ammunition? Or was she blindsided, cast in someone else's script without a chance to change her lines? That's why these texts feel so dangerous. They don't just challenge Blake's claims, they threaten to unravel the foundation of the case itself. And that explosive reality is only the beginning, because as messy as text threads can be, there's another layer even more tangled than private words exchanged on a phone. But texts aren't the only weapon here. Contracts can be just as powerful in reshaping reality.
Now, Blake brought Isabella into this, not Justin. Blake brought her into this when she alleged that Justin was inappropriate on the set of the young Lily's, love scene in the movie, which is also in the book. And she, through what she heard, felt that Justin was inappropriate. That's what was alleged. Now, Isabella's never confirmed this or said this, but what we did instead see, while these two were never in the movie together because she was playing the young version of Blake, they were all over each other during the promotion. They were doing slumber parties. Suddenly Taylor Swift was meeting Taylor and basically getting loved bomb, it seemed, by Blake and Ryan. And honestly, I could see why Isabella chose them because they're a big, powerful couple. Honestly, they could have destroyed her career if they wanted to, as they're starting to prove, right? So Isabella chose the big, fancy couple and sadly, seemingly shunned Justin, which is what he alleged. And it's also in this thing. And so that's why Justin wanted to subpoena her to get these text messages and figure out, did you ever complain? Were you told to shun me? What kind of stuff might there be? And, the only thing we've seen is his response to Blake's inappropriate allegations, where Isabella said, you are a wonderful, smart, sincere director who created such a comfortable, safe space for me. I feel like I could step into this role. I couldn't have asked for a more welcoming environment. And he said, oh my gosh, thank you, our pleasure. This is what we have to base it off of, though. Now, this text exchange was brought in by Justin. That's true. But now Isabella's lawyers are trying to paint that more nefariously. They're saying that but at this point, they're calling it the Baldoni team, even though it's the Wayfair team. They're doing that on purpose. There's so many fingerprints here from Blake Lively. It's so obvious from my perspective. Ron's as well, and others I'm going to show you. But this is seemingly written by Blake's team because it's so anti-Justin in a way. That's just we've never heard this from her. And at first when I read this, I was kind of like, well, wait, what does this mean? But let's break down some of the problems that Isabella's now going to face. Because look, she's trying to make it clear that now, not then, Baldoni has tried to manipulate, threaten, control, and otherwise act inappropriately towards Miss Ferreira. Because of the subpoena? Because of the subpoena and because of an indemnification clause, which we're going to get to in a second.
What if the fine print in your contract meant someone else could decide how you defend yourself in court? That's exactly the trap Isabella Ferrer stumbled into when her indemnity clause suddenly came into play. On the surface, this clause sounds boring. Standard paperwork meant to protect talent when something goes wrong on set. In Hollywood, it's common. If an actor gets sued because of something that happened during filming, the studio or production company is supposed to cover their costs. It's basically insurance baked into a contract, meant to reassure vulnerable performers that they won't be left bankrupt if lawyers come knocking. But here's where things take a dramatic turn. Ferrer wasn't a defendant in this legal battle. She wasn't even on trial. She was a witness. Yet Blake Lively's legal team tried to stretch her indemnity clause in a way that shifted her position completely. Instead of using it to shield her from outside lawsuits, they tried to apply it to her testimony. On paper, that subtle rewording meant they would decide who represented her, how her defense was structured, and how her cooperation would look in court. Normally, staff employees sign contracts that make this protection automatic, but Ferrer wasn't an employee. She was an independent contractor. That difference gave her more freedom, at least in theory. And yet, if this clause was enforced their way, she'd lose that independence. Her every word in court could be filtered, managed, and even censored. Imagine being told you'll get free legal protection, but only if you surrender your lawyer and let your opposition speak for you. Her team saw through it immediately. They refused the free representation, pointing out that it wasn't really free. It was a trap hidden under legal language. If they had accepted, Blake's side would have controlled Ferrer's voice in the courtroom. And in a case where her text messages were already dangling on a knife's edge, the risk of her testimony being silenced or reshaped was impossible to ignore. Commentators on gossip boards called this less of a legal safety net and more of a power grab. They argued no serious lawyer would confuse a witness and a defendant so casually. Not at this level. If that's true, it suggests the clause wasn't misapplied by mistake, it was weaponized. Which raises the bigger question, was anyone really trying to protect Ferrer here? Or was every move about keeping her locked under control? And that's the real giveaway. The indemnity fight wasn't about paperwork, it was a tactic, slowing things down while deciding how to box her in. A delay tactic dressed up as legal detail. And the traces of strategy don't end at contracts, because even the wording of the court filings looks like it was designed to play a different game altogether.
I want to throw this first point in too. She makes it clear, look, I was on this film for 4 days. I didn't get paid a lot. I wasn't involved with a lot of this, but now I'm being pulled in by Baldoni. Well, you actually were pulled in by Blake. Let's just make sure that's correct. I'm going to correct it every time. The complaint that Baldoni filed in response to Lively, not against her, in response to Lively, makes 4 direct references, including a few text messages. Some, not surprisingly, some of the text messages she sent to Baldoni were very positive. Well, why is that not surprising? Because he's a good guy. Included the types of comments one would expect from a young actress to make to the director and producer of her first feature film. So this is typical for her to lie? Is that what you're saying? And all actresses lie? I don't know, man. If I didn't have a safe time on a set, I don't think I would want to text that director how safe of an experience I had. Now, I may say, thanks so much for the experience. I had a great time. I might do something like that, but to be so specific here, this is not going to help you in a court of law if you do decide to suddenly change your tune. Let's be honest. And I can see why Justin posted it and why Justin might be surprised suddenly at the change of opinion from you, because you clearly never expressed your discomfort or any problem, it seems. So maybe he's just confused and worried as to suddenly why, out of nowhere, you're labeling him inappropriate and harassing and all this other stuff. He used these texts to craft a narrative that Miss Ferrer spent substantial time with Lively during the promotion, and that she felt compelled to shun Baldoni in repudiation of her warm words. The complaint made no other allegations that directly referenced her. Well, that's enough, though. There's enough allegations here, and Blake has subpoenaed you. So technically, why don't you just reply to the subpoena? Why didn't she just reply to the subpoena? That's the big question here. It's very strange that she didn't just, respond to the subpoena. Well, the reason she didn't respond to the subpoena is because of an indemnity clause. Now, this indemnity clause is part of her contract agreement. This provision basically says, all expenses should be covered, reasonable otherwise, suffered or incurred by the artist, arising in connection with the development, production, or exploitation of the picture, and all ancillary rights related to there. So therefore, she's saying, well, you got to pay for all my legal bills. But here's the problem. First of all, what Justin then responded was like, well, no, I'm not just going to do that, because that's not how it works. If you do that, then yeah, Wayfair is going to represent you, because that's our plan is going to do that. And then when she's like, well, whoa, I don't want Wayfair to represent me. Fine. They then found some sort of mediator to try to negotiate. Okay, well, what would be covered then if you're doing this on your own? Because it might not be covered if you're not going to then come onto our lawyers, our insurance, and our lawyers' plan, is the gist of what's happening here. And she was like, well, no, that's unreasonable. I can't do that.
Have you ever spotted a small mistake in official paperwork that felt too strange to be an accident? Like seeing the wrong name typed again and again, almost as if someone wanted you to notice it? That's exactly what happened when legal filings in this case began using a label so out of place it didn't even make sense. Over and over, Blake Lively's lawyers were referred to as the Wayfair team. And once people caught it, the theories exploded. At first glance, you'd think this had to be a typo. But when the label kept popping up in different court documents, commentators started asking if it was really a slip at all. One YouTube breakdown even pointed out how consistent the mistake was, saying it looked more like a deliberate choice than sloppy editing. The term Wayfair team doesn't connect to Blake, Ferrer, or anyone else in the filings, so why stick with it? The strangeness of the label turned it into its own kind of headline. What critics suggested next made the story even messier. They called it a PR fingerprint, meaning the label was never truly about accuracy. It was about storytelling. Think about it. Legal filings aren't only read by judges. They get scanned into gossip blogs, shared across forums, and picked apart on shows like Popcorn Planet. The wording, even the so-called mistakes, can shape how news outlets frame the story. If the filings call Blake's side the Wayfair team, then reporters repeat that phrase, keeping the spotlight on it instead of the actual legal points inside the documents. And it wasn't just the naming. Analysts noticed weird grammar slips and awkward phrasing in the same filings. When placed alongside the Wayfair team label, it looked less like casual sloppiness and more like someone planting seeds for the public. These choices read differently to lawyers versus headline writers. To the press, they're hooks. To the public, they're signals. Which makes people wonder, why would a group of top Hollywood attorneys risk looking careless unless it wasn't carelessness at all? That's where the speculation ties back to Ferrer. Gossip commentators argued the framing here wasn't legal precision. It was narrative control. By shaping how the filings looked, Blake's team wasn't just arguing against Baldoni in court. They were crafting a public script, one that painted Ferrer as if she stood closer to Baldoni than she actually did. The misleading label, the awkward wording, even the repetition of it all, they started to look staged. And in Hollywood, staging is never accidental. What's written inside the documents begins to feel less like evidence and more like stage direction for the media. The Wayfair team label pulled attention away from the weak spots in Blake's case, creating noise that framed Ferrer as entwined with Baldoni's side. Which means the filings aren't just filings at all. They're press releases with a legal stamp. If filings can double as press releases, Then subpoenas become the real weapons, and those carry consequences Ferrer can't escape.
Dealt with a million indemnification clauses in my career, as most of the lawyers here have, because they show up in all kinds of different places. And a lot of times, the indemnification clause itself will say, the indemnified parties will cede control of their defense over to whoever is indemnifying and paying the bills. And what you usually want, if you are the person being indemnified, is to say, I'll cede control to you of who the lawyers are and how much they charge, and if you guys are going to pay to settle the case out. But I just want to maintain control over my own, you can't agree that I'll make a public apology without involving me kind of stuff. Right?
Fair.
So they usually have some tenor of that. So number one, the idea that this would cover just responding to a subpoena, which is not an adversary proceeding, is very much in question. And number two,
and just to echo, Ron said the same thing. Indemnity clauses really are there when you yourself are a named party. This was a mistake. We even filed this motion because it implies Isabella herself is noticed that they're trying to get her to testify under subpoena. So if Baldoni's efforts to serve her by alternate methods is granted, she may be found in contempt for not showing up. Basically, this is all going to cause even more problems. And yeah, indemnity clauses do not typically cover costs associated with being third-party witnesses. You don't really need an attorney to sit down for a deposition. Another attorney for one of the sides typically steps in to defend the third-party witness. So if you're not wanting Justin to pay for it, then why isn't Blake paying for this if you got all this evidence? I don't get it. What I smell is happening, and what Ron suspects as well, is that this is a delay tactic, a way to sort of stall it. Because what's really interesting here is if you go through it, she makes 2 points of, well, Blake gave various extensions until the indemnity issue was resolved. And I think they knew this indemnity issue might take a long time to sort of sort out, and therefore Isabella could avoid it. She even then tries to, again, paint him harassive because, well, the same things Blake asked for in her subpoena are the same things Justin asked for. It's very commutative, duplicate of the past, needing to make this overlap of categories, blah, 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 is, proving that it's all to harass Miss Ferrer. Like, come on. What?
When a subpoena lands in your inbox, it's not an invitation. It's a legal command, and if you ignore it, the fallout hits hard. That's where Isabella Ferrer suddenly found herself when Justin Baldoni demanded her personal texts and testimony. It wasn't optional. It wasn't casual. If she refused, she risked being held in contempt, a ruling that could wreck her career and drain her finances before she even had a chance to establish herself. For someone just starting out, the weight of that threat was overwhelming. Ferrer wasn't dragged into the case by Baldoni in the first place. That part came from Blake Lively's filings. But once the subpoena landed, Baldoni made it clear her voice mattered. Her texts, her recollections, her short time on set, all of it became valuable in the courtroom. Remember, she had only been working for a handful of days, barely paid enough to cover a fraction of the mounting costs she now faced. And yet those tiny fragments of her work history now carried the power to tilt the entire case. The choice in front of her was brutal: comply, and risk alienating Blake and the power players tied to her camp. Resist, and risk being dragged into court again, this time as someone refusing to cooperate. Contempt sanctions can mean hefty fines and, in extreme situations, even time behind bars. That's not speculation. That's the real danger of ignoring a subpoena. And Ferrer's situation was already tangled because of the indemnity clause. If that clause went Blake's way, the team controlling her defense might not even be her own. Who pays her legal bills? Who answers on her behalf? Even that part was murky. What makes this sting harder is her position in Hollywood. She's young, she's relatively new. She doesn't have the safety net a star with a decades-long career has built. Instead, she's up against industry giants, expected to play by rules that even seasoned actors struggle with. She doesn't have the leverage to simply walk away. Gossip circles noticed this imbalance immediately, calling the situation a trap. Online reactions argued she was stuck in a lose-lose scenario no matter what choice she made. And here's where the tension sharpens. If she shared everything requested, her testimony might expose contradictions inside Blake's filings. She had seen moments firsthand, including some of the very
there's some
scenes
bad
now
press.
central to the accusations.
She barely got any press. No one knows who
means
she
what she
is.
says can either
And then
reinforce Blake's
here are the
claims
mean words.
or
Now,
pull the rug out
whoever's
from under them
texting
completely.
anybody in this case, stop.
If she withholds, she risks
there's
contempt.
a fan who's out
if
there
she
trying to,
speaks, she risks
please,
unleashing bombshells.
Unless
Either
you're
way,
actively
she
in this
personally
case
pays
or
the
being
price.
subpoenaed,
That's why the subpoena
away.
became
Don't
more than
bother
just
people.
paperwork.
It's not helping.
This is
it only
where the
hurts
chess game
the
turned
cause,
into
in
something
my
far more
opinion.
intimate.
And anybody who's saying
The legal
these,
back and
you
forth
look
suddenly
dumb.
hit her
You
personally,
look dumb. Whether you're
forcing
right
Ferrer to
or I
put her
agree with it doesn't
reputation,
matter.
her
Leave
finances,
people alone.
and her future
now
on the
they're going to be
line.
used against you. Now,
And that
all
personal
that said,
risk ties
it's not even
directly to
that
why
bad.
she once pulled away
you
from
suck
Blake,
bish. I mean, you shouldn't
but
say that,
ended up drawn right back
a lot of
into
this
her
is like,
orbit.
just tell the truth. Stop dodging the subpoena and tell the truth. You're going to lose your audience. Now it's obvious you're going to rate you. Now this isn't nice. You fake ass crackhead. I don't support this kind of stuff at all. Why are you running away? Face the consequences of your actions. Blake and Ryan will take you down with them. Do the honorable thing. Tell the truth. I mean, he's allowed to send this. You're a celebrity now. I get way worse than this. I've gotten way worse because of Blake's subpoena now. This is harassment. Nothing in here is, they're losers. We'll never forgive you. I would not be scared. They're losers, Blake and Ryan. Tell them. Like, people are upset with her. This is feedback. Do the right thing, Isabella. If that was your dad or family member being accused of something that they never did, well, you'd want someone to do the honorable thing too. What's happening to Justin isn't fair, and it's ruining his family and career. How is this a harassing message? Like, this is absurd. Why are you avoiding being subpoenaed? You need to be on the right side of history. Just go to court and say what happened. Amen. You are evading. Your attorney is refusing service. Why? Because he has to find you? Like, that's evading. It's like, just take it. Clearly, you took time writing this instead of just saying, yeah, we'll accept. Speak up and do the right thing. That's all I want you to do. Speak. Your career is going to tank, and I'm glad. Well, that's mean. I don't wish that on you. But
why would an actress who once went out of her way to distance herself from Blake Lively suddenly find her name plastered across filings that put her right back on Blake's side? That's the question fans started asking when Isabella Ferrer's involvement shifted from silence to spotlight. At first, she made her intentions pretty clear. She wanted out of the drama. When Blake began facing waves of negative press, Ferrer quietly stepped back rather than stand anywhere near it. Insiders even noticed her deleting photos of Blake from her social media, a move people read as calculated. To them, Ferrer was trying to prove she was focused on her craft, not on standing in the middle of a scandal that didn't directly involve her. That distancing made sense. Ferrer's role in the film was small. She wasn't paid like the leads and had no reason to throw herself into grown-up battles between Hollywood names. At that point, she had every reason to keep her reputation clean and avoid being labeled as a supporting act to someone else's controversy. But here's the turn that confused watchers. Months later, without warning, she reappeared, not as someone keeping her distance, but as a name tied directly to Blake's legal narrative. The sudden change sparked theories about what happened behind closed doors. Gossip writers pushed the idea she hadn't flipped on her own, but because powerful allies nudged her. Hollywood is a place where rising talents often face subtle but undeniable pressure. Align with the right star, get more chances, cause problems, and see doors slammed in your face. For someone as fresh as Ferrer, the choice might not have felt like a choice at all. The timing raised more suspicion. Around the moments Blake faced bad press, especially when her film, It Ends With Us, was being criticized, articles centering on Ferrer began surfacing. The overlap was noticeable. It looked to commentators like her involvement served a second purpose: to shift headlines away from Blake and back on Ferrer as a supporting witness. Some noticed her posting patterns online changing too, suggesting careful guidance rather than random decisions. At the heart of it, Ferrer's vulnerability defined the situation. She wasn't just caught between two stars. She was trapped between forces way bigger than her. As one source put it, she was very naive when she was cast, and everything to her was a privilege. She was so focused on her character that didn't have time to get involved in any gossip. That's not the profile of a mastermind. That's the profile of a young actress doing what she can to not make the wrong move. And yet, the cruel irony is that her own words of kindness, those texts about safety, support, and respect, are now being swung against her. To Blake's camp, their strategic filings. To Baldoni's side, their potential defenses. To Ferrer herself, their private notes that turned toxic once lawyers laced them into their stories. So she doesn't look like a schemer pulling strings. She looks like the pawn. A piece being moved in a game she never wanted to play. Which leads us to the real story, what these filings reveal about how Hollywood lawsuits are waged in public. This whole storm isn't just about whether Isabella Ferrer told the truth. It's about how Hollywood power plays twist every detail, contracts, texts, even typos, into weapons. What looks like sloppy lawyering may actually be scripted PR theater, leaving Ferrer caught in the blast. Andy Senior even suggested her legal team's moves were meant to confuse and gaslight, which explains the strange patterns we've seen all along. In Hollywood, the courtroom is only one stage. The other is public opinion, and with more filings coming, the next twist could completely rewrite what we think we know about this case.